Welcome back, dear students. In the previous session we had a detailed discussion on the construction and working of carbon dioxide laser. Now it is semiconductor laser. Some introduction. Until recently, helium neon laser has been the only cheap laser in the visible region. I hope you all have seen helium neon laser, even semiconductor laser also. You know where? In shopping malls, you might have seen that barcode reader, that red light coming from a device is nothing but helium neon laser, and also semiconductor laser. Now helium neon laser is replaced by semiconductor lasers. Because of miniature, efficiency, less expensive and can be modulated, semiconductor lasers are widely used in laser printers, CD players, optical fiber communication, etc. The main working principle. Energy is released in the form of photon when electron and a hole recombine in p-n junction. I hope you know what is this p-n junction, and also you know something about recombination of electrons and holes in p-n junction. So this is the main principle of LED, means energy is released in the form of photon, and that is the working principle of light emitting diode and also semiconductor laser. Semiconductor exhibiting this property is known as direct band gap semiconductor. Example, gallium arsenide. Not all semiconductors exhibit this property. Germanium and silicon, they never emit light. So you cannot design LED or semiconductor laser from germanium and silicon. Coming to gallium arsenide. Gallium arsenide doped with trivalent or pentavalent impurity is used in the semiconductor laser. You know what is gallium arsenide? It is a compound semiconductor which is formed when gallium, a trivalent impurity, and arsenic, a pentavalent impurity, are combined together. When you do so, a bonding is formed, and that bonding is partially ionic, partially covalent. That is why it is strong and energy gap is large. Its value is around 1.43 electron volt. First, construction of semiconductor laser. The active medium in this laser is a p-n junction diode, which is made up of single crystal of gallium arsenide. That's why it is called homojunction type laser. And this crystal is cut in the form of a thin layer about thickness of 0.5 millimeter. Two faces perpendicular to p-n junction are silvered and polished and silver. They act as optical resonator, and laser beam finally comes out from partially silvered face. Other two faces parallel to p-n junction are fused with metal contacts, across which we can apply forward biasing voltage using DC source. This is the schematic sketch. This is the upper surface parallel to p-n junction. This is p-n junction. So we have power supply connected in forward bias mode, and this is one surface perpendicular to p-n junction, partially silver. This is another surface which is completely silver, and finally the laser output is coming out from the partially silvered mirror. Wavelength of thus emitted light can be calculated using this formula, where Eg stands for energy gap. Pumping process is by means of direct current injection, that I will explain later on. Output power is quite less, about 1 milliwatt, and it can be controlled by means of forward biasing current. It is small, compact, efficient, less expensive. But some disadvantages: it has poor coherency and stability, and the beam has comparatively larger divergence. See, in semiconductor lasers, one important thing is that there is no metastable level. This was quite important and very essential in carbon dioxide laser, but in semiconductor there is no concept of metastable level. Then where does the hole lacing action takes place? So for this we have to look at the working of semiconductor laser. A detailed explanation of working of semiconductor laser. It goes like this. First, when you apply forward biasing voltage across the junction, electrons from n-type enter into p region, where they combine with holes, causing spontaneous emission. That means electron hole combination releases energy in the form of photon. This will normally happen in LED. The energy level diagram is shown in figure 1. This is figure 1. Look at the p-type energy level diagram. This is valence band, this is conduction band, and Fermi level is very close to valence band in p-type. Please recall this diagram from semiconductor chapter. And this is n-type. The closed circle means dark circles are electrons, open circles are holes. And the region between these two lines is known as active region or p-n junction region. And in this region right now very few number of holes and electrons. Whenever electron enters this region, it directly comes and combines with holes. As a result, energy is released. So since there are few number of electrons and few number of holes, and it happens spontaneously, we don't get any laser beam, hardly we get ordinary beam, that is what LED is. The concentration of electron hole pair in this active region is relatively less. In semiconductor laser, we use high doped P and N types. This is quite important. We have to use heavily doped P type and N type. When they are fused to form P-N junction, means when you combine P and N together, then Fermi level is pushed into valence band and conduction band to attain the equilibrium. Look at this diagram. Again P type, again N type. Now this green color line is Fermi level. This Fermi level was somewhere here earlier, but as the impurity concentration increases, that level goes down and down and down into valence band, whereas here this level goes up and up and up into conduction band. So Fermi level is pushed into valence band, that is in P type, pushed up into conduction band N type. Next, now as the forward current increases beyond certain value, that means you have to increase the biasing voltage, means you have to apply more voltage or increase the forward current, that is called current injection. It is nothing but pumping process. So when you increase the forward current, more and more electrons are injected into P side. Please look at the shaded area. This shaded area represents number of electrons. Earlier it was only this much. Now it is full almost. That means more electrons are injected into this region. So number of electrons increases. So more and more electrons are injected into P side and carrier concentration rises to a high value. This is nothing but population inversion. So we achieve population inversion by means of increasing the current. Next, among those electrons, one of the electron will come down by emitting the light spontaneously, and thus emitted photon will cause stimulated emission. That is, any one recombination of electron hole leads to spontaneous emission, which in turn triggers stimulated emission. That means all these electrons will come down to valence band, recombine with holes present here, and at a time energy is released in the form of photons. Thus emitted photons travel back and forth by means of reflection and finally escape through partially silvered mirror. See here, there is no metastable state. What all we did? By taking heavily doped N-type and P-type, we pushed the Fermi level, and then by applying high current, we made more electrons to enter the active region, that is indirectly population inversion, and finally they came down to ground level by means of stimulated emission and photons are emitted. So this is the explanation of working of semiconductor laser. Okay, after having so much of information about fundamentals of lasers and construction and working of two lasers, now it is time to learn something about applications part. The use of the laser can be related to its special properties such as monochromaticity, directionality, coherency and brightness. Because of these four special properties, we find the role of lasers in many fields such as defense, industry, research and development, biomedical applications, entertainment, agriculture and many more. Now as per the syllabus we have to study two applications. The first one is rangefinder, laser rangefinder. First some introduction. Look at this situation. You want to measure dimensions of a room. How do you measure? Using measuring tape. So to measure dimensions of a room with measuring tape, one would need another person, so you need an assistant to hold the tape at the far wall and a clear line of sight across the room to stretch the tape. So you need an assistant. He has to hold the tape and move along a particular direction, and he has to hold it in a straight line. What if I can do the same job by one operator? I don't want the assistance of that person. So I just want to do on my own. And with just a line of sight, just by looking at the other end, can I measure? Is there any solution for this? Yes, there is a solution. That solution is rangefinder, the two laser rangefinder. Here onwards I call it as LRF. LRF works on the principle of radar. And you know what is radar? It makes use of characteristic properties of laser beam, which I mentioned already in the beginning. Here comes construction and working. Look at this diagram. This is the laser source. This is the target. I want to measure this distance. I want to find this distance, that is range. And I have a receiver and finally a display board. Construction goes like this. A typical LRF consists of source L, receiver R and display T, and of course readout display board. Source used is a pulsed laser like Ruby, which sends out a collimated and a short pulse of laser radiation to the target. It is then reflected by the target and moved towards the receiver. So what happens? Laser source gives one pulse, it moves towards the target. After reflection, it moves towards the receiver. Receiver consists of photomultiplier tube. It is something like an amplifier, photodetector and a filter. Why we need filter? Filter actually eliminates unnecessary radiations coming from solar radiation background. So all those unwanted signals are eliminated. Filtered signal comes to receiver where it is amplified using photomultiplier tube. This amplified signal is then focused onto photodetector. By counting the number of pulses that arrived, time of travel can be calculated. That means time taken to travel this plus this distance, that is small t, can be calculated. Typically distance is equal to product of half of the time and velocity. Distance is equal to speed into time. Actually, I want only this distance. So that is nothing but time taken divided for traveling this total distance divided by 2. So here total distance is 2d. I want only d. Therefore, it should be t by 2. Then range is calculated, and thus calculated range by the counter is displayed in the readout. So just you press a button, pulse goes here, comes here, and thereby the distance is displayed. Simple principle. Distance is equal to velocity into time. Time we are measuring. The time is nothing but total time taken for this journey. But that you divide by 2, that gives you time taken for this journey. That is the working principle of laser rangefinder. Factors affecting measurement of the range. For accurate measurements, surface of the target shall be flat and reflective. If it is oblique, the light will be scattered and you lose some information and measurements becomes inaccurate. Then dimensions of the target must be large. Target should not vibrate. Vibrating surfaces will again scatter the light. And most important, atmospheric condition. Atmosphere shall be clear. Cloudy weather leads to poor result. So these are some of the factors that affect LRF working. This is one typical LRF. Now comes advantages. See, in radar there is a broad aerial directivity which causes interference from neighboring objects, but this problem is eliminated in LRF. Since divergence in the reflected beam is less than 0.05%, range measurement is highly accurate. Operator is easy to operate. The operator must only select an object and press the control button. Distance will be displayed. Just you target light towards the object, press the button, you will get the distance. LRFs are very compact. For example, laser walkie-talkie rangefinder, a compact and small instrument weighing just 4 kg or less than 4 kg, useful to range objects at a distance less than 5 km. So they are handy. Some applications. LRFs are used in several defense areas such as tank laser rangefinder for artillery, armed vehicles or a truck. In sports like golf, LRF is used to determine the distance of certain fixed points on the ground. LRF can also be used as altimeter, that is to measure the height. The height up to 300 meter can be measured with an accuracy of 1.5 meter. LRF is used for forest survey to measure dimensions of the building and also for survey purpose by civil engineers. The next application is data storage. Data storage is a process of recording the information in a storage medium. So recording can be called as storing, information can be treated as data. Recording is done by almost any form of energy. Biologically it is DNA, RNA, and in our day-to-day life it is handwriting, recording, magnetic tapes, optical discs, USBs, etc. These are some examples of storage media. Look at this picture. Do you know what it is? Look at this particular one. You know what it is? It is an IBM model of 350 disk file, capacity of 5 megabyte, and it was designed in 1950. Look at the size. It is as big as refrigerator. That was the scenario in 1950. Now some history. Here is a look back at some interesting storage devices from the early computer era. I just run through: punch cards, hard disk drive, magnetic tape, floppy disk, laser disk. I doubt you have heard of the first two names, but I think you are familiar with the remaining three. Try to know more about the memory storing devices and their historical developments. Nowadays, we are used to having hundreds of gigabytes of storage capacity in our computers. This was pure science fiction only a few decades ago. For example, the first hard disk drive to have megabyte capacity was as big as today's refrigerator, and that was in 1950, not so long ago. But today we have compact devices having memory capacity of several gigabytes, and the credit should go to optical storage devices. Optical data storage is a process of use of light, obviously laser, to write and read information to and from a memory device. So it is a process of usage of light for recording the information and reading the information. In optical storage device, data is recorded by making marks in a pattern that can be read back with the aid of beam of laser light precisely focused on a spinning optical disc. Advantages: optical storage devices are economical, inexpensive and efficient, able to store and retrieve large amount of information at a high performance level, faster access times, delivers more authentic duplication of sound and image. The data on them cannot be destroyed by power outrages or magnetic disturbances. They need not be kept in tightly sealed container to protect them from contaminants. Three most common optical media are CD, DVD and Blu-ray. I hope you have heard of all these three names. CD capacity is roughly 700 MB. DVDs can go up to 4.7 GB. Blu-ray has 5 times the storage capacity of DVD, and as of now it is mainly meant for HD movies, that is high definition movies. Here comes construction and working of optical storage device, that is CD. First, construction. An optical disc called compact disc or CD is a glass or plastic substrate with one or more thin film layers, which are also called as storage layers, coated upon its surface. Typical storage layers are either made up of dipolymer films, that is for write-once applications, and an alloy of germanium, antimony, tellurium for rewritable CDs. A CD is 6 inch in diameter and contains small tiny dents, which here onwards I call as pits, and flat surfaces, spots, I call here onwards as bumps. Pits and bumps appear along a very thin track that spirals outward from the center of the disc. The width of the track is smaller than 1/20th the width of your hair. Height of the bump is much smaller than this. Please try to imagine one CD. It looks like this. Here these are the tracks, okay, pits, and these are the bumps. So they are going outward away from the center of the CD. So like this. So there is a plastic substrate also, and the recording process is like this. These pits are burned by using low power laser about 5 milliwatt. Burning of pits changes the optical properties. This particular is out of the scope of this discussion. So I just call it as there will be a change in the optical properties, which leads to recording of data onto the disk. Normally we use semiconductor laser for this purpose. So all the data is recorded in these pits. So you focus laser beam to the pits. The optical property of the pit, that is nothing but either polymer film or germanium, antimony, tellurium layer, and there will be some variations in their optical properties. Thereby the data is stored. Now how to read it? Again, a laser beam is used to read the digital information because it can be focused onto such an incredibly small spot and therefore distinguishes between bumps and pits. See, the distance between the pit and bump is not too much, very narrow, very small gap, and that gap can be identified only by laser beam. When laser light shines on the surface, light will hit the bump and pit. Light that hits the bump is reflected, but light that hits the pit is destructively interfered. So light is spread out. So no light returns from the pit. Light returns from the bump but not from the pit. The reflected light, that is from the bump, is interpreted as 1 and unreflected light is interpreted as 0. The resulting digital signal is then converted into analog signal. Analog signal is fed into amplifier, and amplifier is then convert the sound signal into sound, and thereby you can listen to the music. I just now made one mistake in the previous slide. I said amplifier converts the signal into sound. It is wrong actually. Amplifier only increases the strength of the signal, and we have converters. They convert the signal either into audio or into video, and thereby you can either listen to the program or you can watch the program. Well, that's all about the construction and working of optical storage device. Well, with this I have come to an end of this session, and up till here I explained you fundamentals of lasers, construction and working of two lasers and two applications in detail. I hope I met your requirements and you are satisfied. If you have any doubts, please feel free and call me, or you can even contact me via email. Meanwhile, I duly acknowledge these sources which helped me a lot in preparing the videos. Thank you once again, my dear students.